Welcome to the presentation on trends in distant education. My name is Joud Jabri Pickett, and I will be presenting on the history and progress of the 5 generations of distance education. Distance education, or distance learning, is defined as a system of structured education in which the instructor and student are separated by varying degrees of time and location. Generations, as they've come to be known, are the different stages through which distance education grew and developed into the high-tech mechanism of learning it is today. In 1728, the residents of Massachusetts were presented with their first opportunity to access education at a distance when Caleb Phillips posted an advertisement in the Boston Gazette offering instructions in shorthand by mail. What came to be referred to as correspondence education was characterized by the use of print material sent through the postal system. So we can consider this the first generation of distance education. The first generation continued in much the same way until the 1840s, when a teacher of the English language, Sir Isaac Pitman, launched the first full course in shorthand by sending students postcards containing text that was transcribed into shorthand. Students would complete the work and return it by mail for correction. The use of uniform postage rates across Britain made this form of feedback more efficient and affordable. In 1858, the University of London was the first institution to offer full higher education degrees through correspondence. Known as the birthplace of distance education, the external programs were less expensive and therefore more readily available to students around the world who would normally be unable to afford nor access an education. Students across the British Empire were responsible for traveling to various British Council offices to sit exams in their respective countries. On the other side of the Atlantic, in North America, towards the end of the 19th century, Queen's University of Kingston, Ontario, Canada, joined the trend of correspondence education and established the International Correspondence School, or ICS. Several other Canadian universities started developing similar programs primarily to provide educational access to rural and remote regions across the country and to Canadian military personnel located around the world. It was the University of Wisconsin at Madison that first coined the phrase distance education when advertising correspondence courses to students across the country. Following this, during the first decade of the 20th century, they then started recording lectures on LP records, which were mailed to students. This use of multimedia methods marked the beginning of the second generation of distance education. As a matter of fact, in the 1920s, many colleges were granted commercial radio broadcast licenses and took the opportunity to include educational material in those broadcasts. In 1922, Penn State was among the earliest adopters of this newly available technology. The University of Wisconsin once again pioneered statewide telephone-based education programs in 1965. A few years later, Stanford University founded Stanford the Stanford Instructional Television Network. This was geared primarily at part-time engineering students. This, the third generation of distance education, can be defined by the use of synchronous and non-synchronous communication systems. In other words, the universities that were developing programs in distance education were using one or several different combinations of technology to provide their lessons. Another key characteristic of the third generation was an increased level of opportunity and speed of interaction between student and instructor through information and communication technology, or ICT. Before looking at further progress, it's important to keep in mind that new technology does not necessarily mean that old methods like print and post were abandoned. After all, distance education should remain accessible to people who may not have access to technology. Fourth generation distance education is characterized by strong communication and flexible learning systems using the internet. Many institutions worldwide are now increasing provisions for easily accessed instruction and services with flexible programs. The use of CD-ROMs and the World Wide Web opened the possibility of greater interactivity between student and instructor. This is the flexible learning model based on online delivery of instruction via the internet. Now, the fifth generation, as we all know, has seen further growth into what is referred to as intelligent flexible learning model. Through various social media platforms, streaming, and opportunities for live face-to-face communication, distance education now provides greater opportunity than ever before. Western institutions are not the only ones providing distance education. Elsewhere, many different colleges and universities around the world are also growing and developing in the field. In 1918, the University of the Cape of Good Hope was officially renamed the University of South Africa and remains today the largest university in Africa dedicated to distance education. Anadolu University in Turkey, Korea National Open University, and the Open University of Japan all started distance instruction during the second generation to further expand education opportunities. Thank you very much for your attention.